Hello everyone, thank you for having me over here to talk to you about a wonderful announcement today about beelines, which I'll come to in a little bit. It's been a little while since I was actually in this room at a biodiversity conference. There was one previously. Don't know how many of you were here in 2004 for the UK Biodiversity Partnership Conference. Anyone else remember that? Yes, one, two, a few of us were here. So, that's quite a while ago, 14 years. Place looks exactly the same. I think it's probably weathered better than I have, actually. It's also somewhat sobering to recall that, 14 years ago is over halfway back to when the actual Biodiversity Convention was first signed up to in 1992. So we've had 26 years now of doing biodiversity work. And I think an interesting point to reflect on progress, really, and what we have achieved and what we haven't achieved. We've had a bit of that this morning already. For us at Buglife, I think the Biodiversity Convention was important in three key ways that strike me as new and different to what was going before. The first with the Biodiversity Convention is that it acknowledged that there was a need that everyone needed to work together. So whether you were, national governments or local authorities or just people living somewhere, everyone needed to cooperate and collaborate. So the fact the whole planet had to come together to try to save biodiversity, I think that was, very clearly one of the things that the Biodiversity Convention set out. Second thing that I think, is the important progress that the Biodiversity Convention made was it embedded in our sector a clear idea that unless you know where you're going to get to, you're not going to get there. And so we set out, clear targets for species and habitats, and those targets, that targeted approach of trying to get somewhere and knowing whether you've got there, again, that's something that rationale underpins a lot of what we do when we're talking about biodiversity conservation. The third important principle, particularly for us at Buglife, is that the term biodiversity, biological diversity, it is a level playing field. So if you think about, wildlife, there's sort of wildlife that people care about and wildlife people don't care about, and potentially some things like bacteria, viruses, mosquitoes, that maybe some people don't know if they're wildlife really at all. But the Biodiversity Convention gave us a level playing field. Everything was of some value and everything needed to be looked after and regarded and given some respect. So those are sort of the three things that I take from the Biodiversity Convention as three core areas. And I'm pleased that in Wales we see all of that still going on. So at Buglife we're not limited geographically, so we do stuff globally very occasionally, across Europe sometimes, across the UK a lot of the time, England, Wales, Scotland. So we can see quite a lot of the stuff that's going on around the place. And Wales has always kept, I think, kept alive those flames of the Biodiversity Convention, that idea of everyone working together. We heard the Minister this morning committing to a collaborative approach to reviewing your targets. So there you are, we're back at the targets. Working out where we're going to get to. So I think that's really important that, Wales is keeping those lights burning. And you're still having biodiversity conferences. I mean, after the UK conferences, there's never been an England biodiversity conference, which is a great shame. But in Wales, hats off to all of you guys out here working away, keeping that fire burning, making sure that biodiversity is looked after in Wales. Of course, we now have the ACCI biodiversity targets, which we're now working towards trying to address the causes of biodiversity loss and improve the status of biodiversity. That's our high-level target. And under there, we've got all the other targets that we're trying to achieve. One of the areas where I think we can look back and say there has been quite a bit of progress, certainly from our perspective, is on pollinators. You go back to 1992 or even 2004, and we didn't have the same level of awareness about pollinator declines. So things like this, the shrill carder which is once very widespread across the UK, now very rare. You can see just here, this is where it used to occur, and then here you've got these red bits where it's still hanging on, the brown fields of the Thames Gates Way, Salisbury Plain, and then just along here. Interesting one this, I think, from the point of view of the M4, and again, we in the UK and probably further afield are looking to see how the M4 inquiry pans out and how the sustainability and future generations commissioner, whether her view on that carries weight with the decision-making process. So again, potential there for Wales to be showing some leading in how we're looking after some of these endangered species. But the bigger picture is, it's not the only pollinator that's declined. We've seen declines in all sorts of pollinators, such as the white-lined dart, a species that was once pretty abundant and now only turns up a few at a time. So it's still widespread. It's not gone extinct. It's not in danger of extinction, but it's part of that loss of bioabundance that Michael McCarthy's written about, that seeing vast numbers of things flying around in your headlights that we don't see anymore. And of course, since I was last here, we now have the State of Nature reports that we all cooperate together and work together on putting together all that essential biological data and coming up with verdicts on how species are doing. And the picture with invertebrates, predictably for any of you who've been following this issue, is not brilliant. 59% of the species are still in decline. Came out last year from Germany, where over 27 years, 76% decline in the abundance or the biomass of flying insects on nature reserves in Germany. So this is very worrying, that we're seeing all these declines across the pollinators and declines across the insects and the abundance of insects in Germany. Very concerning indeed. And the public get it as well, certainly public of a certain age, who can remember in the olden days having to stop their cars and clean the windscreen so they could actually see where they were going. That loss of wildlife, that loss of bioabundance is something that people are starting to get more and more aware has happened. And we have to start thinking about, why has it got like this? Why has it got so bad? This was a poll from a few years ago which showed the public do genuinely get this. So we heard, why aren't pollinators higher up the political agenda? Well, I think they actually are quite high up the political agenda, pollinators. I've been having some conversations just today with some senior politicians around bees, and 85% of the public think it's a serious environmental issue. That's more than think air pollution is a serious environmental issue or climate change. So the public definitely get this. You talk to most MPs and they'll say they get more correspondence about bees than any other topic. So this is definitely a high-level political issue, what we're going to do with our pollinators. And of course, the underlying problem, we've had neonicotinoids, which hopefully are now about to disappear over the horizon into the sunset. But the underlying problem with pollinator declines is the loss of wildflowers in the countryside. Not only have we lost 97% of our wildflower meadows, but they've also become fragmented. And I think this is critical. So we've got these tiny little fragments of habitats left, and we know from work done in the fens on swallowtail butterfly that when you fragment the habitat of the butterfly itself responds by shrinking. And the reason the butterfly responds by shrinking is because if it leaves the fragment, it can no longer find alternative good habitat, it no longer lay eggs and have a marvellous success, but it's going to die in a hostile landscape with no appropriate wetland habitat to lay eggs in. That means its genes are taken out of the gene pool, and the only genes that are left are those of the species, the individuals who don't move around. So, linked in with the fragmentation, we then start to get increasing problems with dispersal of life across the countryside. And again, we had that interesting talk earlier about habitat destruction, dispersal, and how we go forward and try to get a more robust landscape. And invertebrates are really key to this. So if we can crack this for the little things, so the little things can start to move again, start to respond to climate change, as we know they are currently not doing. We know that the bumblebee distributions are compressing, so the southern margin is moving north as the land becomes unsuitable, but the northern margin isn't responding to that. So you're getting lots of compressions, and that means declines. But if we can reverse that, if we can start to put back the wildflowers, we can start to recover the situation. This is where the concept of beelines comes in, by designating 3-kilometre wide corridors through the landscape and then targeting action. We can be 5 times as cost effective with our work than if we did this randomly across the countryside. By creating these stepping stones in a patterned way, we then enable a relatively small amount of resources to actually have a really big impact in terms of habitat restoration and the restoration of dispersal and functionality back into the landscape. This is what the mapped beelines look like just last year, and we do this, Buglife coordinates most of them, although some of them have now been taken on by Wildlife Trust. In fact, there's over 100 partner organisations that are working on beelines across the UK. And we sit down with, for instance, Yorkshire, which was the first one here. We sit down with the county council, the local authorities, the Natural England, the other local wildlife trusts, and we work out, we first do a modelling exercise, then we work out where is the best place to put the lines to have the greatest impact for pollinators and to link people back to wildlife as well. This is Claire Dinham, our officer here, coordinating one of these workshops where we've got everyone around looking at where we want to restore beelines. And the fantastic news today is that we are launching our beelines map for Wales. So Wales is now the first country in the world to have a complete beelines map, just narrowly pipping Northern Ireland over the line, who have got a map in their back pocket but haven't yet got it out. So well done, Wales. Congratulations. And well done to Din and the team over here, and all the support we've had down here. You've got at the bottom of some of the key funders. The Welsh Government's supported us all the way through. This is the roads and what's it called, Din? Tunk Road Agents, who've also been very supportive. The biodiversity recording centres, and all the other people who've been involved in the consultations, the memberships who've given us comments, provided the data as well, which underpins this beeline map. Local authorities, other NGOs have also been very supportive. NRW, it goes without saying. AONBs, there's all sorts of people who've been involved with this, and so thank you to all of you for helping us to put this together. And of course the challenge now that we've got our map, is to start targeting our work towards it. In the words of the minister, who's, I don't know where the N's got in there, it's supposed to be in, beelines in Wales, that's supposed to say, apologies for that. So the minister says, I will I won't try to imitate her. The Wales Beelines map creates a huge opportunity for us to all work together, again, we're all working together, to help our bees, butterflies and other pollinators. The Beelines map can be used by everyone to help connect and restore meadows and other wildflower-rich habitats for pollinators across Wales. The Welsh Government has supported this initiative, and we hope that beelines will play a key role in delivering our action plan for pollinators in Wales. So thank you very much for that support from the Minister. And we also hope, obviously, that when we're looking at the agri-environment schemes we were talking about earlier, that will also start to provide some of the resources to restore some of these wildflower areas and get these corridors working properly. If we do so, then we create a brighter future, both for the wildlife and for the people, and for all, it's not just about the insects, let's face it. We're not doing this just for the insects. We're doing this so we can have a sustainable environment and put back some of that wildflower habitat that we've lost. Just one final thing before I go, which is just to alert to you that we've not finished yet in Wales Buglife. We've got lots more to do. And one thing that's going to come out shortly is the Wales Threatened Bee Report. We've looked at 26 of the most threatened bees in Wales and found out some quite disturbing things about the status and how well those species are doing or not doing. So I'm just flagging that up. That's the next thing that will be coming out. So keep an eye open for that as we try to put the conservation of insects really solidly on the map here in Wales. And thank you very much, and it's great to be back. In another 14 years, I'll see you again.